What's up, everybody? Just want to take a quick second and let people know that I am self-supported. I now put all of my episodes on Substack for paid subscribers. I put them up early, and then 24 hours later, I release them to the public on all my platforms. I also have Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, Buy Me a Coffee, Zelle, a P.O. Box, and Locals, Patreon. And all of these, all of the links are in the show notes of every single episode I put out. So look forward to continuing to, provide great conversations. And thank you all for your continued support. Well, Matt, it's not that long gaps before our conversations, but so much has happened. I talked to you last week when I was in West Jefferson, North Carolina, that historic hotel, and it's like a lifetime ago with everything that's occurred in the last week. Everything's occurred, but yet nothing's occurred at the same time, because it's like over the weekend there was so much happening, but then you start assessing everything and you're like, there was no damage done. So I put up a comment on Facebook, and I was talking to Paul Craig Roberts earlier, and I brought this up to him, and I'm going to do the same here with you. I said, after Saturday, the MAGA movement, Trump ended his presidency tonight. The MAGA movement is dead. And I got so much heat for this, saying, it needed to be done with Iran. They took out the nuclear capabilities. These MAGA patriots, and these are MAGA people, saying, the Middle East needed to be cleaned up. They're cleaning it up. And one woman was actually made it a point to say, I listened to Rubio on Sunday, and he said that they were effective in these bombings. So, Paul had said, Dr. Roberts he said, patriots can be indoctrinated as easily as the other side. And I was like, wow, that's a good way to put it. And they're just loyalists to where. And we were talking about boomers, and he said, yeah. They believe that there's always somebody out to get the United States, and you have to destroy them. The whole good guys, bad guys. You're older than I am. You don't see it that way. Why is it you see it differently than other people that are your age, that are patriots? Yeah. This episode is brought to you by Vaulted. Launched by McElvaney Financial Group, with Vaulted, I literally just tap a button, and I own physical gold stored in a professional vault. Vaulted is offering all of my listeners $50 of free gold when you click on my sign-up link. They have a tool called Vault Plan that allows you to passively add your gold position every month. Just activate it for 6 months and you will get $50 of free gold in your account. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to vaulted.blbvux.net/coffeeandamike.
Look, I'm at a certain level, I'm offended when I hear, boomers are equal neocon, equal, Trump, right or wrong, no matter what. I love Trump. But I get it. If it's like a 60% target and I'm not in the 60%, I just got to suck it up. I'm a boomer, but I'm not a neocon. Anything but. My memory of all this goes back over a long time, because I am old enough to remember, for example, the Iranians taking over our embassy when the revolution happened. So there was a Shah of Iran, and he was our ally, and him and Nixon were buddies. And then the next thing all these crazy radicals are taking over the country, and the Shah of Iran has to flee to America, and bringing it up till today, his son is like, I am the Shah number 3, and if I just go back to Tehran, I can take over the country. And I'm like, what are these people smoking? They're giving him actual legitimate time, like on Fox News. Like, in Iran, they're gonna want a guy who when he was like 9 years old fled Iran, and he thinks he's going to go back to Iran, and they're going to welcome him. So I've been right and I've been wrong on some of these things. I was in Beirut in '83, and Reagan went in with good intentions. there's so many echoes of all of this, and having a long perspective really helps a lot. So the Israelis had invaded Lebanon because the Palestinians were acting up as always. The Palestinians had been kicked out of Jordan. If you ever remember, there's something called the Black September, which was 1970. The Jordanians had had enough of the Palestinians, who the Israelis had, basically run out of what became Israel. They wind up in Jordan in 1970. The Jordanians expel them. They wind up in Beirut, mostly Beirut, Lebanon. I mean, why is Matt going into all this history? So Black September in 1972 did the Munich Olympic deal, and they just wanted the world to know Palestinians had been kicked out of Israel and they'd been kicked out of Jordan, and now they're in Lebanon. In 82, the Israelis invade Lebanon. They get all the way to the Beirut suburbs, and it looks like Israel's going to take over the important part of Lebanon. Israeli-backed Christian militias did massacres in two you can say quote unquote or not, but two refugee camps, Sabra and Shatila, and the world was pretty disgusted by that. But this is before there was really a 24-hour news cycle. So Reagan sent in the Marines. I was part of that whole deal. It was called the Multinational Peacekeeping Force. So we're going to go into Lebanon, and we're going to keep the Israelis and the Shiites and all these people apart, so that everybody will be able to get along, and we'll figure something out. It winds up with as it always does. You go in as referees. We're kind of referees, but we're also kind of negotiating, and all these echoes come down to today. So they blew up the American they blew up the American embassy in '83 in the spring. Then they blew up what is history calls the Marine barracks, which was not a barracks, in October of '83. And ever since then, we're at war with Iran. But it's so much more complex than that. Putting in terms of Iran killed these Marines in '83, it just happened. Everybody was in love. It was just a world of peace. And then Iran decided to kill Marines, which is so simplistic. So this is where, being born in 1957 does give me some perspective on all of this. So when we went to, jumping forward to 1990 era, Saddam Hussein invades Kuwait. Again, it's sort of Russian invasion of Ukraine. It depends on where you start your chapter. Where is page 1 in your book? Oh, Saddam Hussein just decided to invade Kuwait. But we had been doing this thing called slant drilling from Kuwait into Iraq, where we're basically taking our drills, instead of going vertically, we're going at an angle deep into Iraq. And this was making a big problem for years. And our female ambassador essentially telegraphed to Saddam that we don't really care if you just want to come in and take care of that area where they're doing this slant drilling. He took that as a green light from America. Iraq moves into Kuwait. At that time, I thought this is going to be a disaster, war in the desert, and I was really against it. But we did easily push Saddam out of Kuwait. So it's sort of like right now, hey, you thought it would be World War III. You thought it would be the end of the world. But at that time was called Desert Shield, then Desert Storm. So we pushed the Iraqis out of Kuwait. And that was sort of like George Bush later on, mission accomplished, right? Mission accomplished. We pushed Saddam out of Kuwait. But we didn't go into Iraq to finish it off. So it was just a festering wound, which came back later. We had, later after 2001 with the World Trade Centers, it was conflated, Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan was conflated with our old ally, then enemy, Saddam Hussein, as an excuse to like go in and finish off Iraq once and for all. We didn't do the job. We didn't finish the job with Desert Storm. So now we're going to go in and we're going to conquer Iraq. And that was the rolling into Baghdad. That was George Bush's mission accomplished moment, right? So these things have a way of like swinging in the narrative, in the public media narrative. These things can swing like a pendulum. One day you've just conquered Baghdad, and American tanks are rolling right through Saddam Square, and it's mission accomplished. And the next thing you know, you've got years of a brutal civil war inside of Iraq. And once again, we start out as like we're the peacekeepers. We're just here to like have all the Iraqis get along well. And the next thing you know, and it's so predictable, just like in Beirut. I mean, this probably goes back to so many wars, going probably back to the like freaking Trojans, Greeks, and Romans. You come in as like, hey, we're just peacekeepers, and the next thing you know, somebody has said, you've crossed the line. You're not a referee. You're now on somebody's side. So we're going to treat you as an enemy. I'm not an enemy. I'm just here as a peacekeeper. Doesn't matter. So at the end of Desert Storm, we thought, great, we kicked them out of Kuwait. But it just came back, 2001, the Bushes, we're going to have to take over Iraq. And how did that work out? I mean, how many people died? Americans, thousands, Iraqis, hundreds of thousands, some say millions, dead not only of ordnance and bombs and bullets, but of starvation and lack of sanitation, not having access to a modern grid, clean water, things like that. Madeleine Albright was quoted as saying, like, that's the price you got to pay. A few 100,000 innocents dead, it's okay. And I'm just really sick of it, and I'm done with it. So now we've sleepwalked into this whole Iranian thing, and this was all begun when Bibi Netanyahu, who has his own political problems inside of Israel, if he didn't have an ongoing war to say, look, we just have to like have censorship, no disputing that I'm the leader, we're just going to continue barrel rolling through the Middle East, war after war, so nobody can question my authority as a leader of Israel. And then he comes to us and says, Iran is weeks away from a nuclear bomb, which as everybody by now has seen, all the videos and memes, compilations, since the 80s and 90s, they've been saying Iran is weeks away from the bomb. That is their go-to excuse for we need to attack Iran. But what happened Thursday a week ago was, no matter how you define it, it was a sneak attack by Israel against Iran. You can try to put lipstick on that pig all day long, but it was a sneak attack. We were in quote unquote negotiations with Iran when Israel did their Pearl Harbor. And in many ways, it was worse than Pearl Harbor, because they not only attacked the quote unquote nuclear sites, they attacked civilians, scientists, they attacked generals and politicians. And you can say, well, they all work for that goddamn Iranian regime, so they're all fair game. Well, look at it from somebody else's point of view. How would you say it was any different than if some other country said American scientists and politicians and military officers could just be assassinated overnight? 100 of them, 200 of them across America, like, ninjas, assassins. then the next day we'll do the kinetic part of the Pearl Harbor. When I was a kid and a young adult, when I grew up, Pearl Harbor was like the worst thing that ever happened to America. And I understand, we did an oil embargo and we did a scrap metal embargo on Japan, and I understand these points now. But at the time growing up, the consensus in America was the Japanese did a sneak attack at Pearl Harbor. That was December 7, 1941. It's also my bud's graduation class from SEAL training, 1979. So I remember that day real well. So it was considered the most dastardly thing that the Japanese were negotiating with us, because it was coming to a crisis, because we had cut off oil, we had cut off metals, but we were in negotiations. Our diplomats are talking to their diplomats. And then on Sunday morning, December 7th, they attacked Pearl Harbor. And when I grew up, that was considered the most evil, nasty, low-life, dastardly thing you could imagine. And when the whole war spun out over just 4 years, 41 to 45, the war in the Pacific, it ended up with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And the most common reply to that would be, you Japs started it. You started it. If it hadn't been for Pearl Harbor, we wouldn't have had this war. So if you start a war with a sneak attack, with a Pearl Harbor, then don't complain if we invent an atom bomb and drop it on a couple of your cities, because you started it. And that was, from the growing up, 60s, 70s, 80s, that was how my generation looked at World War II in the Pacific. You started it with a sneak attack. So anything that happens after that is on you. Well, this time, the Israelis started it with a sneak attack. And you can say, yeah, but we told them you can never have a nuke. We told them you can't do this. We gave you fair warning. But Israel started this whole thing with a Pearl Harbor. And not only did they attack kinetically, with missiles and allegedly with planes and drones, they had assassins all over Iran who killed people, like, walking from their house to their car before war was declared. Going back to Japan and Pearl Harbor, the Japanese diplomats that knew war was coming sent out like a message at the last, like an hour before the bombs are dropping in Pearl Harbor, saying negotiations are off, we're having a war. I forget the exact how it was put, but we said that doesn't count. You can't say negotiations are off an hour before you start dropping bombs. That was actually clean and honorable compared to what the Israelis did. Trump and the Americans, Witkoff, etc., are in negotiations with the Iranians. Come on, we're going to talk on Monday. Let's keep talking. The Israelis pull a Pearl Harbor, and they have the Israeli and the Israeli parallels to, like, say, Japanese ninjas, or like samurai ninjas, spread out to assassinate people that are just going to work that morning. You can say, yeah, well, he was an Iranian general, or he was an Iranian scientist, so he should expect to be killed at any moment. How's that different from the Unabomber? Some guy's working on a contract for Lockheed to make the new drone or the new bunker buster, and you have somebody assassinate him walking from his house to go to his job at UCLA. Okay? So the Israelis do a sneak attack, including assassinations. And they know they can't finish this deal. They know they can't. But it's going to trigger a retaliation from Iran with their ballistic missiles against Tel Aviv and Haifa, which it did. And then the next thing you know, help, Mr. Wizard. We can't save ourselves from Iran. They're attacking us. Come on, big brother. come on, Uncle Sam, save us again. And it looks now, either Trump is a complete fool and was totally in the dark and fooled by Netanyahu and the Israelis, or based on his own Truth Social posts and statements, he thinks he's very clever, that they worked together. Yesterday, after the bunker buster bombs, he was bragging about the partnership between America and Israel. So we have the little, our little proxy run out and do the Pearl Harbor, including assassinations during negotiations. In the world of diplomacy, this is unbelievable. This is an atrocity in the world of diplomacy, that you're in negotiations and you have ninjas sneak out and kill the enemy negotiators, along with scientists and generals. And it's not going to end well. This idea of a decapitation strike has never worked. In many cases, the general that you assassinate is much more moderate than the guy who replaces him. If you think in terms of our American Civil War, McClellan, you go through many generals, and McClellan wouldn't fight. You go through several generals. Eventually, you get a U.S. Grant who will fight. So if you kill a couple of Iranian McClellans and their replacement are Ulysses Grant type people, it's not going to work to your favor, unless your whole idea is that we just want to drag America into this war, because Iran is like the fountainhead of our enemies. Iran is our ultimate adversary, and we've taken out Hamas. We've turned Gaza to rubble. We've taken out Hezbollah in Lebanon, which with the starting with the pager attacks, right? Very clever, but another kind of Pearl Harbor-ish thing where children were maimed and killed because they just opened the box that came in the mail. So you can say, it was very clever, and we killed a lot of Hezbollah. And then we followed it up with Israeli Air Force strikes deep into Lebanon, including in Beirut. So, okay, now Assad is removed in Syria, and he's replaced with a Jolani, who is a ISIS and CIA asset. That's a whole other chapter. And Kevork Almasian on Syriana analysis is probably the best for explaining how that works. But today, Syria, after 12 years of civil war, beginning with the American CIA, losing the acronym, but the American program to remove Assad has succeeded, and now Syria is a wasteland ruled by ISIS murderers. They just blew up a church last Sunday, an Orthodox church, killing dozens of Christians. Way to go, CIA, way to go, IDF. Now Syria, instead of being a secular regime under a Russia tilting Assad, is a wasteland of ISIS terrorists, and it's our ISIS terrorist, Jolani, who's running the country. Now he puts on a tie. So from Gaza through Lebanon, through Syria, Israel's program has been working beautifully. There's no more Iranian connection across Syria to support Hezbollah in Lebanon. Gaza is destroyed, and the next big target in the Greater Israel Project is Iran itself. And obviously, no sane person thinks that any combination of Iranian or American soldiers can conquer Tehran, can have that Baghdad mission accomplished moment. You were never going to see American tanks in Tehran. Israel doesn't care. What the Israelis want, or I should just say Bibi Netanyahu, what he wants is a destroyed, wrecked Iran, an Iran at the level of Syria. no electrical grid, no military power, people struggling to stay alive to avoid starvation and disease. That is Bibi Netanyahu's vision for Iran. And we Americans, we're just playing the role of the big dumb backer of tiny Iran, who are going to bludgeon our way through Iran, triggering failed color revolutions. The Shah's son, they're giving him actual airtime in America, as if some guy that left Iran 50 years ago is going to come back to Tehran and take over. The only way you can look at this is that the neocons that run American media, and I mean all the main channels, they can't possibly believe that the Shah's son is going to be welcomed back into to lead Iran. So giving him time is just setting up conditions for a civil war similar to what we've seen for the last decade in Syria, leading to a Syrian wasteland ruled by the worst people in the world, but it's no threat to Israel. After Assad fell and our stooge Jolani took over, was put in power, Israel just spent weeks with their Air Force destroying any military targets left in Syria. So Syria today doesn't have a tank. It doesn't have a helicopter. It's just a wasteland ruled by ISIS terrorist murderers, now killing Christians and Alawites. And that's their vision for Iran. And we're the big dumb stooges being walked into this. And go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, so two things with that. One, the events on Saturday, so I wrote about what I said at the beginning. I wrote about how I thought Trump ended his presidency and the MAGA movement is dead after Saturday night. Now it's looking like, I still believe that, by the way. Well, and Paul,
I do too.
Paul pointed out he thinks the MAGA movement's just fractured. You've got the neocons, and then you've got the people that don't want the war.
If it's fractured, it's dead. If it's fractured, it's dead. Its only strength was its unity against the Democrats. Fractured MAGA movement is easy prey for the Democrats.
So do you think it's fractured, or do you think it's dead, or it's the same?
Totally
It's same in your eyes.
Totally fractured.
And fractured equals dead to you?
Well, impotent.
Yeah.
If it's impotent, it might as well be dead. So that a fractured MAGA movement can't oppose the Democrats. And we're setting up for a war in the Middle East. We have a war in America. They're about to possibly elect a communist Muslim mayor of New York. I mean, they have ICE people being doxxed everywhere. They have ICE agents, where gangs in California will just overrun, the ICE agents and release their prisoners and beat up the ICE agents. We're in a civil war in America. The last thing we need to do is go to intervene in a war on the other side of the planet, or start a war on the other side of the planet.
So it appears now, the bombs on Saturday, they didn't do anything. Nothing was affected. Iran knew about it through back channels.
It's all kabuki. This is all kabuki. It's not about what it's about.
Well, here's what I don't get, Matt. I'm like, so even Paul was trying to explain this to me, and I don't grasp it. So maybe the way you'll communicate to me, I can understand. Explain this to me like
once Iran turned into Syria and Gaza.
Okay, so I get that, but why was the United States having back channel? If this is what it is, why was the United States having back channel conversations with Iran where they say, all right, we're going to drop these bombs. There's nothing there. Iran responds back today by hitting an evacuated Qatari U.S. military base. Like, it's all staged. So what was the point of that?
Yeah, it is staged. After, in Trump's first term, he decided to kill General Soleimani when he was out of the country. I think he was in Lebanon, and they drone striked him at like an airport, where his SUVs were pulling up to a private jet. And that was considered like, yeah, that's a real righteous assassination. So we're now in the war of assassinations. So if one of our top generals General Raisin Kane. We love to make these generals into like some kind of Marvel comic superheroes. You know, General Gorilla the Gorilla and Raisin Kane. If this guy is shot walking from his car to the restaurant, how are we going to say, "Oh, that is so immoral. That is so horrible. How could you possibly do that? We have to go to war with you." That's what Israel did on the night before the raids. They were all over Tehran. People that just live in a regular house or apartment, go to a regular job. Yeah, technically, okay, I'm a scientist, I'm a general, but they were assassinated, right? Oh yeah, but we're the good guys. We get to say what's righteous. We get to say what's on the side of God and love and goodness. And the Iranians, they're evil demon maniacs. So if they were going to assassinate any of our scientists, the guy that's making the next bunker buster, if his car blows up in America, that will be like, oh my goodness, he's just a scientist who works for some corporation. But that's what we backed when Israel did this sneak attack.
But Matt, here's what I'm going to interrupt you for a second because this is what I'm confused on. So if the whole thing Saturday night was political, what's the word? Political theater, right? Political
Yeah,
theater,
kabuki.
Yeah, kabuki theater. What was the point of that? I don't understand what was the point of that. If the United States and Iran are talking and they knew what was happening, I don't get it.
If you link the B-2 bombing raids, if they actually occurred, because this is one of the beauties of stealth bombers. Okay, supposedly in this Marvel comic movie or this Mission Impossible or Top Gun Maverick version of reality.
So Will
If you
Shriver, Will
can't,
Shriver's been saying the Top Gun
yeah,
Maverick. He's been pointing that
right.
out.
If you can't see a B-2 bomber, how do you know it was really there, right? So like bringing it to Qatar today, and I'll go back to the larger point. Now they're saying that Qatar and us shot down all the Iranian missiles heading into Qatar. How do we know that? Because I heard today, I was listening to Alex Jones for a little bit, and he played a quote. I mean, he played Trump's voice, actual quote by Trump, talking about what happened after Trump ordered the drone assassination of General Soleimani, who is considered in Iran a big national hero, right? This would be like killing Mad Dog Mattis or Raisin Kane, right? He's like a national hero. So we assassinated Soleimani, and Iran had to, for their own internal domestic audience, show that they struck back. So we have these outposts in Syria, which I call staked goats. Why do we have 40,000 troops in places like Iraq, Syria, right? Qatar, all over the Middle East? We have 5,000 here, 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 and here. For what? I call them staked goats. They become a bullseye target. So if you want to easily kill some Americans so we can like then trigger another level of war, here they are. So Trump, on this quote that was played on Alex Jones InfoWars, Trump is saying, oh, they called me before the missile attack and they said, keep your men on the base so they'll be safe. And then the missiles hit like 2 miles out in the desert from the base. So it was kabuki, so that the Iranians could on Iranian television say, we struck back at an American base in Syria. So today, they attacked Qatar, but by all accounts, they warned Qatar, they told them it's coming, right? Calibrate your defenses because we don't want people to die. When people die, that's when countries say, like after Lusitania or things like that, well, we're going to war. But if you just make some craters in the desert, 2 kilometers west of the airfield, then you can say we attacked Qatar. So when I hear in the media Qatar shot down all the Iranian missiles, I don't believe it. I want to see the craters. When you when you attack when you're trying to defend against a ballistic missile. So let's say the ballistic missile, it's a 1 ton warhead and 1,000 pounds of it is the explosive. Okay, no matter what you do, you can hit it with the perfect Patriot shot. The missile is still coming in, right? I mean, it's still 2,000 pounds kinetic, going near hypersonic. It's still going to make a crater, even if it doesn't explode. So it's not like, remember the movie Armageddon? The big asteroid is coming. You're not going to stop it. You're not going to like blow it to atoms that all go around the Earth. It's still coming. Instead of one big asteroid, it might be like a shotgun asteroid if you blow it into pieces. But just ballistics, it's coming. So I have zero faith that Qatar shot down all the Iranian missiles, because after the Soleimani assassination, Iran warned us, said, keep your men on the base, and fired the missiles 2 kilometers out in the desert. So I think they probably did something like that today in Qatar and fired the missiles into the desert. They just want to be able to tell the Iranian TV audience that we did fire back. But this doesn't mean everything's going to quiet down again, like what happened after the Soleimani assassination and that Iranian like fake counterattack. I think that now Iran is going to go full bore for atomic weapons. But I've seen some YouTube videos on this. I forget the name of some of these scientists, and it's really lost on people, the basic science and physics of this. If Iran has 60% enriched uranium, U-235, and you have to get it to 90%. Okay, that's not that hard. Let's say they got all the uranium out of Fordo, and it's now hidden in warehouses and hidden in other places, and they're on a full-bore production plan to create atom bombs. People need to understand this, and it goes back to basic physics. It's very easy to understand. You can look all this up on the internet. The Hiroshima bomb was what they called a gun-type bomb. It's the most simple atom bomb possible. You have 2 big chunks of U-235 in a cannon, and you fire them at each other, or you fire one at the other. So 2 60% critical masses of U-235, they hit each other, and you have Hiroshima. The problem with that is that it weighs 5 tons, and you need a B-29 bomber or a C-130 to load that thing and fly it. There's no possible, and that's all Iran could build today. Even if they had 90% enriched uranium, all they can do with that is make a simple gun-type Hiroshima bomb, an implosion device, 2 critical masses shot at each other, but it weighs 5 tons. You can't put it on a missile. You could put it on a truck and try to drive it into Israel, which, good luck with that. I mean, it's not like exactly a counter-strike option if you've got to put it on a ship and sneak it into Haifa. I mean, the Iranians, no matter what anybody thinks about them, they're not suicidal. They haven't done things in the last 40 years that indicate that they just want to, no matter what, blow up Israel and then have Iran obliterated with 200 hydrogen bombs. So it's not as if, and I think people don't understand this, when people say Iran is going to get a nuclear weapon, it's not a weapon they can put on one of their missiles and fire at Tel Aviv, because it would be a 5-ton Hiroshima little boy bomb. In order to make a weapon, an atomic weapon, small enough, compact enough, and light enough to put on top of a missile, you need plutonium. You need to make an implosion device that's much more efficient. Iran's years from that, if ever. And if they did have a peacetime nuclear program for energy, one of the byproducts of that is plutonium. So they don't even have that. So people are automatically conflating things that don't add 2 + 2 = 4. Iran being able to build a nuclear device like a Hiroshima bomb does not mean they can fire a missile at Israel with it. On the other hand, Israel is thought to have, 60 to 200 hydrogen bombs that can be put on missiles. And nobody talks about that. Israel's not a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They just said, screw you. No inspectors, no nothing. The Atomic Energy Commission, we don't care. We have our own atomic program using original fissile material, which we stole from America. And the way that it was stolen from America in the 1960s makes you think that people sort of like left the vault door open and went on break to allow Israel to walk in and just cart off the fissile material. They didn't need to make centrifuges. The Israelis obtained their fissile material straight from Uncle Sam. It would be like, oh, Fort Knox, nobody locked the door, and somebody came in with forklifts and trucks and took out, tons of gold. Whoops, like Epstein's murder. Whoops, the cameras weren't working. The guards were asleep. Somebody emptied Fort Knox. Somebody took enough fissile material for hundreds of atomic weapons and sent it to Israel. See, Americans don't know all this history. But in a lot of the rest of the world, they do understand it.
Trump wrote on True Social, "Congrats, world. It's time for peace." This is on Zero Hedge, but from his account on True Social.
Yeah.
Trump thanks Iran after a very weak response. The war is over.
Trump thinks this is General Soleiman 2.0. And, we got what we wanted. And Iran has enough of a face-saving gesture with some, the missiles fired into the desert in Qatar that we can just end this now. But the problem is the rest of the world, and especially Iranians, they now totally understand their only way out is to actually build workable nuclear devices that can fit on a missile. So they're not going to do something to trigger a massive American bombing, campaign against Iran. Not right now. They now say, North Korea, we should have done what you did. Pakistan, India, just build it. Just build it, demonstrate it, then talk about it. So Iran's mistake, from their point of view going forward, is we tried to comply with all of, with the atomic regulatory regimes, and we thought we could use this as a negotiating chip. We'll get to this level of enrichment, and then we'll be able to negotiate the lessening of sanctions against us. Now they're going to be very hardline. In public, they're going to say it's over with America, but in secret, they're going to be working full-time on a bomb because they know that, like North Korea, nobody is going to respect them until then. They see what happened to Gaddafi. Gaddafi gave up any, small WMD program he had, and he wound up, murdered with Hillary laughing about it. So look at what Assad, same thing. Assad tried to play nice with the West, and it just was like a sign of weakness, and we took him out. And now, Assad's in Russia, but his people are suffering, and our ISIS CIA henchman is in charge, blowing up Christians and churches. So the Iranians are going to be just quiet for the time being, because they, I'm really not sure. I mean, I don't have any information other than what I see, open source. According to the Israelis, they're just flying jets all over Tehran at will. According to others, they're flying drones. But clearly, their air defenses have been inefficient or insufficient. Some people think that that their air defenses were taken out in a clever way, and it's very relatable to the Ukrainian operation where they put trucks deep into Russia that launched drones that took out some of Russia's strategic bombers, whether they were active bombers or they were mothballed bombers. But that idea of sneaking a truck into Russia, it seems like that's what the Israelis did on the night of their sneak attack. That they had Mossad agents and probably Kurdish, paid agents driving trucks that had during normal times been scoping out these Iranian air defense positions. So this is asymmetric warfare, defined. You build an an air defense system, and you're thinking, how do we stop everything from F-16s to F-35s to B-2s that are flying, from way over the horizon. But meanwhile, we're just here in the desert, and some guy driving down the road with binoculars can go, "Yep, I located another Iranian air defense position." And we're not going to attack it with F-35s or F-16s. We're going to attack it with drones from, 10 kilometers away, the night before the big attack. So I think that a lot of Iranian air defenses were crippled or destroyed by these close-range drones. So this is a very important harbinger of things that could happen, say, in the United States, against our sitting Air Force and naval assets that parked on runways. But it's also the kind of trick you can't just use repeatedly. It would have taken the Israelis months or years, to develop the agent network to bring in these drones. I'm sure they didn't drive these trucks from Israel to Iran. So you have to purchase trucks, modify them, load those square cells on the back of the truck with drones, and then use them across Iran to cripple their air defenses. That's a one-trick pony. That's a one-time shot. You won't get to do that again. So I think before Iran does anything major, especially against the United States assets or personnel, they're going to want to bring in new air defense and completely, debug it. If there were cyber attacks, figure that out. So that the kind of a sneak attack victory that Israel had the first night, taking out Iranian air defenses, it's not a repeatable kind of a thing. You're not going to be able to do that twice. And I think that for Russia, I know that Russia is obviously very busy and strapped with the war in Ukraine, but Russia and China have to be just absolutely fascinated with what really happened with this B-2 strike. Look at the time, let's say it actually happened the way that they say it did, and these B-2s just flew across Iran and dropped the bunker busters, and they weren't detected in real time. But forensically, looking at all the data later, because I'm sure there are Russians and probably Chinese too, all across Iran as tech advisors who are going to be looking at the forensic electronic data, and they're going to be saying, aha, now we understand how you detect a B-2 bomber. We didn't see it in real time. They dropped their bunker busters, whether the sites were empty at the time or not. But for Russia, it's a big deal. Could America just fly a B-2 to Moscow and drop a bunker buster on the Kremlin? I mean, that's a very serious big deal. So they're going to now be looking at putting together all the electronic recordings across all frequencies to find that's where the B-2 is. Now we know how to detect it on the way in. We didn't last week. It got through. But we, more than anything else, want to know how to detect this thing the next time. So the Russians are going to be, and the Chinese are going to be, as much as they can, helping Iran. And people are saying, oh, no, they're too busy. They don't want to. The Chinese are mad at Iran because they might cut off their oil, and the Russians are too busy in Ukraine. Let me tell you, nothing is a higher priority for both of these countries than figuring out how, if it happened, B-2s just rode across Iran undetected. So for both of these countries, this is like it's sort of a proxy or surrogate war like the Spanish Civil War in the 1930s. The Americans, not so much, but the Germans and the Russians are completely involved in the Spanish Civil War, developing dive bomber tactics and troop transport airplane tactics, hugely important for what was they knew the world war that was shaping up. That's what it is now in Ukraine and right now in Iran. The Russians want to know what was it with our S-400s that failed. Was it a cyber attack? Was it close range drone attack? What was it that failed? And how do we avoid that? Because these Americans eventually could be dropping bunker busters on the damn Kremlin. So they're going to be needing to bring in new air defenses to test them. And on the Iranian side, so we just did this Qatar thing. The Qatar rocket mission was sort of to like balance out the bunker busters, which didn't, as far as I know, kill anybody. Both sides warned each other, essentially, clear out your nuclear sites. And Iranians warned Qatar, here comes some missiles. So they don't want to escalate based on like a mass casualty exercise. But that doesn't mean Iran stops firing at Israel. And Iran is 78 times bigger than Israel. Iran has 10 times the population. So if all you're doing is trading attacks, and remember, it gets harder and harder for Israel to attack Tehran because the tricks that they used in the first days of this war are perishable. The Iranian ballistic missiles, medium-range ballistic missiles being fired into Israel, they're not perishable. They keep working. And most people think that the Iranians used their older and less effective weapons first. When you send a swarm of ballistic missiles in, you want to. Some of them are almost sacrificial. They may even have like cement warheads. They're just meant to soak up the Patriot and THAAD missile defenses. So going forward, as long as Iran can keep every day, every other day, firing a couple of ballistic missiles that hit targets in Israel, the Israeli economy can't get back to normal. But Iran, being 78 times bigger with 10 times the population, can absorb much more punishment and still have an economy going forward. So just because this thing between America and Iran may be winding down after Qatar, this Kabuki theater, that doesn't mean it's over between Iran and Israel. And the long-term goal, and the thing that I'm most worried about is if Iran keeps firing missiles, eventually they're going to say we have to, at some level, we're going to have to send American troops into Iran.
So you don't think somebody messaged me, I was looking down, somebody messaged me on Substack after I wrote that Trump, and the exact words were, Trump ended his presidency tonight. No one voted for bombing of Iran. Rest in peace, MAGA. And somebody writes, yeah, about that, you might want to reassess that prognosis. And
right. And look,
I could be wrong.
After before Desert Storm, I was thinking, a war in the desert is going to could be a bloodbath. I was really against it, and we had, that was the road of death and all of that. It was a turkey shoot for our side, kicking Saddam out of Kuwait. But that didn't mean Saddam was gone. So in 1990-91, with Desert Shield, Desert Storm, Americans were like, yay, rah, rah. We just kicked their ass. We went over to the desert and we pummeled the shit out of them, and Saddam had to flee out of Kuwait. Victory. We won. Okay? But we had like 6 months in Saudi Arabia to build up our forces. Ships are going to Saudi Arabia every day, unloading tanks, unloading, artillery shells, putting troops in giant tent cities. We had 6 months to a year to get ready for Desert Storm. And we kicked them out of Kuwait, which is like kicking them out of freaking Rhode Island. All right? But that did not end Saddam Hussein. His regime did not fall. He went back to Baghdad, and then a decade later, 2001, 9/11 hits, and the Bush neocon faction, even though the attack, if it came out of anywhere, it came out of Afghanistan, and it was mostly Saudi Arabians, but the Bushies conflated Saddam Hussein and made the whole WMD bullshit scenario because they thought, here's our chance. We're going to go in and deliver the knockout blow, and we're going to get rid of Saddam Hussein. And in a matter of weeks, we rolled into Baghdad, and that's the mission accomplished, right? There's Bush on the aircraft carrier. Mission accomplished. But the mission wasn't accomplished because then you're just in a drawn-out Iraqi civil war, and you're one of the participants. And now Iraq is a client state of Iran, dominated by the Shia. Before it was dominated by the minority Sunni under Saddam. Now it's just an extension of Iran. And we still have the power to keep some bases in northern Iraq, keep bases in Syria, and like I call them, staked goats. These are sacrificial pawns meant to be hit by missiles at some point to give us a casus belli to go against whoever is attacking them. There's no reason for Americans to be in Iraq and Syria today. We have enough oil, in America. We don't need to be putting soldiers out, in missile range of Iran, unless they're just a staked goat.
That's what I was trying to, explain to people, and it's amazing, the text messages. Well, it was the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do, and I'm just like, how did this benefit me as an American?
And not only,
but Matt, you know what they respond though before you answer that. You know how they respond to me? They said, "Well, do you want to get nuked? Do you want to get nuked?" That's what I get. That's the question that's posed, and then also, these people were chanting "Death to America." They've been killing thousands of soldiers for years, and that's the justification for this.
As far as do you want to get nuked, if you have enough, 90% enriched U-235 that you can make a Hiroshima little boy gun type, the most crude A-bomb, you'll need a giant truck or a train or a ship to move it. It cannot be put on a missile, okay? Unless it's like the Saturn V or, Musk's Mars rocket. You're not putting a 10,000-pound bomb on top of a missile to fire at Israel. So Israel can rest easy. Iran will never be able, until they have plutonium and a much more developed program, years and years in the future. So if Israelis are saying, yeah, but we're afraid they might suicide bomber a ship into Haifa with a nuke on it, I think the Israeli Navy can take care of that. Or if they're gonna put their 5,000, their 5-ton bomb onto a transport plane and fly it at 300 knots from Iran to Tel Aviv, I think that the Israeli Air Force can deal with that threat. But people are conflating if Iran gets a bomb with a bomb that goes on a missile that could hit Israel in 15 minutes. That's bullshit. It's just basic physics.
They think it could happen here, though, Matt. I'm talking about people in this country that are accusing me of not being a patriot in support of what's going on.
It's a much bigger threat. Let's say, because the Straits of Hormuz thing has come up, and that's all about energy, right? Energy is like the blood. Energy is the oxygen and the blood cells for the world. You don't have to shoot somebody through the brain if you can just shoot them in the heart. You stop the energy, the whole organism dies. So Iran the Iranian parliament said, we may give permission to close the Strait of Hormuz. And it's very interesting. Trump didn't need to go to Congress or do anything. He just did all this on his own after being triggered into it by Bibi Netanyahu with a sneak attack, right? Pearl Harbor, a sneak attack during negotiations. And we killed the negotiators. So here we are. If we start, say, taking out Iran's power grid, their oil refineries that are sending oil to the internal market, like get the gas station, they don't have unlimited oil refineries in Iran. They produce oil and they export a lot of crude. But if we took out their refineries and their grid collapses, and people are, there's no running water in Tehran, city of more than 10 million. There's no power, no water in Tehran. At that point, then the sleeper cells would be activated and they would go after our grid, which they can do kinetically inside of the USA without using missiles or bombers. So if we see this escalating to Israel taking out Iran's power grid, because apparently today Iran hit one of Israel's major power stations and took out like 15% of their power, and I don't know if that was restored in an hour or maybe it can't be restored, but if the Iranians have accuracy enough on their missiles to hit things like power plants, then you can expect Israel to be hitting Iran's power plants and refineries. Then you're talking an existential threat to both of them, because modern cities can't exist without electricity and running water, right? I mean, all you have to do is cut off, as we've discussed many times, cut off the electricity, cut off the running water, and a big city dies. So if the Iran-Israel war continues, even though Trump thinks America is now out of it, if the Iran-Israel tit for tat continues to go after their energy, their energy assets, refineries and power plants, at that point, I would expect to see the sleeper cells activated, and our grid will be on the table. And America, as we've discussed many times, is the glass house, the glass mansion. We're very fragile here because it's not as if America's social problems are all perfectly resolved and we're a nice, beautiful, stable, loving country. We have Antifa and the La Raza Mecha types openly attacking ICE agents. And then when these people are arrested, the communist, pro-Aztlan judges release them. So we have our own civil disorder to worry about. This is the last time to go around the world getting involved in something where our energy grid could be put on the table as a target.
So do you think that this is going to continue with Israel and Iran? They're going to just be shooting rockets back and forth from this point? Like it's past the threshold of stopping?
I think that there are really good people like Witkoff that are genuinely trying to stop this. I wouldn't be surprised. It wouldn't shock me if somebody like a Tulsi Gabbard or a Witkoff resigned and said, you used me. I thought I was negotiating in good faith, and you sent the ninjas out to kill the people I was talking to. In the diplomatic world, that's like the lowest thing you can do. That was one of the things that we hated about the Japanese, that they were negotiating right up to Pearl Harbor. And only like an hour before Pearl Harbor, they put out a little, telegram saying negotiations are off, there's a state of war. And we said, that doesn't count. You can't say negotiations are off, there's a state of war, and then an hour later bombs are dropping. What Israel did was worse. We were negotiating. America was negotiating with the Iranians. And Bibi Netanyahu sent out his ninja assassins to kill generals, scientists, and politicians, to decapitate their government as their bombs are falling. So this may not play, it'll never be on Fox News or American media, and it won't be widely understood inside of America within our media narrative bubble, but to the rest of the world, they see Trump and Bibi Netanyahu as like an evil world wrestling tag team, that like while I'm saying, hey, let's talk, my little buddy is like hitting you over the head with the steel chair, right? And when you get up from that, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know it was going to happen. Then my little buddy, stabs you in the back. That's how the rest of the world sees this. That Trump and Netanyahu did a 1-2 deception on them. Why would anybody negotiate with America now? It's like, oh yeah, America will be talking to you while their little proxy is getting ready to drone strike you. Who would negotiate under those terms?
Paul not only said that, but he also said with Russia, like, why would anybody negotiate with Putin? He, abandoned Syria. He has left Iran. He's not helping Iran at all.
We don't know that.
Mm.
I mean, we don't know what's going into Iran right now. But it's just forget what leader is in charge of Russia. I don't care if it's Stalin, Putin, Brezhnev. Your generals are going to be saying, we need to know why our S-400s failed. We have to know that because it directly relates to the war in Ukraine and a potential NATO attack against Russia. So right now, Iran is the test and is the research and evaluation test bed for all of this. So we need to send some new radar techs in there. We have to be able to find out what we can learn about these B-2s. How are they detectable? They weren't, assuming that we're told that it actually happened, which is not certain, that the B-2s could just fly right over Iran undetected. Where did they come down from the Caspian? What was their vector in? And what failed that we didn't see them? And more importantly, retrospectively looking at all of the electronic forensics, is there some little, something on the screen right there that we missed that's like, there's the B-2, that's the giveaway? I mean, that in Serbia, they figured out how to shoot down their stealth fighters. It's not all radar signature. There are other things that are happening. It's not just radar. There's like, you're a hole in the sky. How do you detect that hole in the sky? There's electronic emissions. There's other things, acoustic things. So for Russia, this is like really top center. How do we figure out that how B-2s just flew across? We have to learn how to detect them. And just as in the Ukraine war, some of our vaunted weapons have kind of been turkeys, like the M1 Abrams tank. It's bad for PR if you've been telling the world that we have the best air defense, and the Israelis just took it out, and now they're just flying freely over the country that was using your air defense. So you want to get your reputation back, and you want to convince NATO not to attack Russia in the future. Then you'd better figure out what went wrong and how to improve it. And if it's the case that they weren't taken out by Israeli F-16s and F-35s, but they were taken out by Mossad agents with Kurdish agents that were in place doing close-range drone attacks. It's like I said, you might have this anti-air facility out there in the desert, and you're all ready to detect and shoot down airplanes within 400 miles of you, but you didn't detect the guy in the truck with binoculars who's recording your grid coordinates for a simple close-range drone attack. Very relatable to the Ukrainian attack inside of Russia against their bombers. How do you prevent guys in a truck from releasing 50 drones and taking out those air defense systems from a vector that they were not designed to protect themselves? These air defense systems are looking at the horizon for hundreds of miles around, but they couldn't stop a drone 100 feet off the sand, from blinding them. So, yeah, Russia needs to figure these things out, and we would the same. I mean, everybody would the same. So, it's resupplying Iran with modern air defense is going to be job number one. And Iran's not going to want to go to war with us until they have figured out how to defend their airspace. You can't go to war with America if we're just flying freely over their country. So that's going to have to be that's like key terrain now, is figuring out what went wrong with Iran's air defense.
It's a lot to unpack here. It's so it sounds to me as obviously everything can change, but Israel and Iran, this is going to continue.
And something people just have to remember: if America is not defending Israel's side, and after after Bibi Netanyahu assassinated the people we were negotiated with, I would have closed the door. I would have said, "That's a backstab. That's like dishonoring us. We're negotiating in good faith, and then you ninja assassinate the people we're talking to." I'd be done. So it does make me think that Trump is completely in Israel's pocket for some reason. But people need to grasp these basic realities, and I've written a couple of Substacks in like the last week or so. Iran is like two and a half times bigger than Texas. Okay. Iran is 5 times bigger than Germany. Iran is 5 times bigger than North and South Vietnam. So America went around the world, across the Pacific, didn't have to worry about anything getting shot down over the Pacific, right to the border of Vietnam. And we fought the Vietnamese for 10 years. And we eventually said, we can't do it, we quit. We lost, 40,000. The Vietnamese lost probably 1 million, 2 million. But Vietnam could continuously be resupplied from China through Laos and Cambodia. If we had said, hey, in 1940, let's just attack Germany. Germany is 1/5 the size of Iran. It would be like, no, we're not ready to just attack Germany. I mean, they got all those tanks, they got all those soldiers. Iran is 5 times as big as Germany. It has 90 million people. If we get sucked into a land war in Iran, we're done. It's great flying B-2s over and doing the Top Gun Maverick thing, right? Mission accomplished. That's great. But if we get sucked into an escalatory ladder where, we got to drop in the tier 1 guys to check out the nuclear site and seize the material, or we've got to do the 82nd Airborne is going to be the security perimeter, like the Rangers in Black Hawk Down. I know we're not putting boots on the ground. We're just going to drop the 82nd Airborne, and then we'll extract them after we take over these airfields. This is the complete madness. We fought in Korea from 1950, 50, 51, 52, and 53, and we lost because, people don't remember this probably because it's not even covered, but the Korean War in 1950 started, if you think of it, on the 50-yard line. The North Koreans pushed us to our 1-yard line. We were facing extinction. MacArthur did the Incheon landing like an end-around loop, and we pushed the North Koreans back to their 1-yard line. And then China entered and pushed us back to the 50-yard line. So all those people died in Korea, going from the 50-yard line to our 1-yard line to their 1-yard line, back to the 50-yard line. All those people dead, Korea destroyed. And why could we not win in Korea? Because China was resupplying them right across the Yalu River. MacArthur wanted to go to war against China and bomb China. MacArthur fired him. As bad as Korea was, all those lives lost, Truman wasn't going to go straight into a land war against China. in 51. He wasn't going to do it. So all those people died in Korea. All those people died in Vietnam. Okay? Iran is 5 times bigger than Vietnam. It's two and a half Texases. If we get sucked into fighting Iran on the ground, we're going to lose. There's a great early Mel Gibson movie called Gallipoli, where the Australians are coming for we're coming to fight for the British Empire in some place called Turkey there in Gallipoli, and it's like, well, those guys, they're like Middle Eastern Turks. What do they know? The Brits and the Australians got their asses kicked, wiped out, destroyed. Doing these expeditionary missions on the other side of the world, it rarely works out well. So I mean, people don't. I see like Mark Dice and other people. They do these like interview people on the beach, and they don't know like who did we fight in the Revolutionary War? Ha ha! I don't know. Japan. The ignorance of people that vote in this country is astounding. But to say, what do you think is bigger, right? What do you think is bigger? Israel or Iran? I'll bet most Americans would think, maybe Iran's a little bigger. Iran is 78 times bigger. It has 10 times the population. It has its own industry. It's not a third world country. I see this on Fox thrown around. Oh, Iran's been going backwards. It's a third world country. Just look at Google Earth. Look at Google Street View. Tour anywhere in Iran. Iran is a first world country. These are people that don't need to like send their students to Germany to learn engineering. They have engineering schools in Iran. They invented chess. They are not morons. They are not like some desert Bedouins. These are sophisticated people. I'm, not a supporter of the regime that took over in 1979 as a reaction to our guy being kicked out, but do not underestimate them. When you attack a country, it tends to unify them. And if we get sucked into a land war in Iran, it's going to be the end of this country. Just remember, it's 5 times bigger than North and South Vietnam put together, with a bigger population.
What do you think the future of Israel is?
I think Bibi Netanyahu's I think he's an evil person. I think that the October 7th attacks were greenlit. They were a green flag operation. I think that they knew full well the October 7th attacks were going to happen, and that everything after that was leveraged. So for the IDF, for Bibi Netanyahu, I think October 7th was like a Lusitania. It was a setup, not a setup, but you allowed it to happen. And remember, Israel created Hamas because Israel did not want a unified Palestinian Authority that would be popular both in the West Bank and in Gaza, the two big population centers, not part of Israel. So in order to fracture the Palestinian side and not have a unified Palestinian Authority, Israel backed and created Hamas. So you can almost say Hamas has been like a sock puppet. Of course, you can say, oh, it became like a Frankenstein monster. It got out of control. Probably true. But I believe that they knew October 7th was going to happen. And the casualties that happened on that day, like in chess, sacrificing a pawn or a bishop, for the greater, the greater victory, it's allowed them to go weapons free in Gaza, to just 20-1 collateral damage. If our program if our Lavender program says there might be a Hamas guy in that building, destroy the building. So they've just gone weapons free, turning Gaza into Dresden. They did the pager attack followed by Air Force attacks across Lebanon. Syria is now neutralized. It's a wasteland. It's a ISIS hellscape instead of a secular regime that wasn't on our side. Now Christians are being bombed in churches, and we can refuel our tankers right over Syria because Syria is like an unopposed airspace, just free space, and that's their goal with Iran, is to just turn Iran into a Syria. How many refugees are going to come out of an Iranian civil war? How many millions, of Shia Muslim refugees are going to wind up in Europe and America? And we're going to, it's so predictable. But I'm very glad if the B-2 bombings, if it happened, if Iran is now backing down, I'm applauding. Great. And I feel like after Desert Storm, yay, we kicked Saddam out of Kuwait. Big victory. But that didn't mean it was over. 10 years later, we're back in Iraq. All those thousands dead Americans, millions dead Iraqis, Christian diaspora out of Iraq. Iraq used to be like, 15% Christian. Now they're gone to the four winds, dead or dispersed. And we now think we're going to go into Iran. Iran is 4 times bigger than Iraq. I just got to say these things. Iraq is like a pimple compared to Iran. I mean, Iraq is only 25 million people. Iran is 92 million people, 4 times as big. And they have their own industry. They make their own rockets. They make their own ships.
Yeah, I was trying to look at Will Shriver real quick to see if he had any update since Trump has declared time for peace in the Middle East, that it's all over.
Yeah.
This is the bizarre world that we're in. It is unbelievable.
It is, and I compare it to Godfather. It's when we say negotiate, when Trump says negotiate, I've got a gun pointed at your head. Sign here. Our version of negotiation is I have a gun pointed at your head, and here's a contract and a pen. Sign here or I shoot you. That's the negotiation. And it works. It works while it works. The Godfather can last a long time, but nobody loves the Godfather, maybe his own family, and eventually somebody else is going to knock him off. Just like in Godfather 2, the old white hand guy with the white hat, he gets knocked off by, De Niro, young Vito Corleone. Nobody loves a guy who negotiates with a gun at your head. I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse. Yeah, it's cool, it's funny. You wind up with a dead horse head in your bed, but eventually, nobody's going to come to your aid. We backed the people that did a worse sneak attack than the Japanese. I mean, when they did that sneak attack while we're negotiating, as far as I'm concerned, we should have said, done. We're done, Israel. We're done. We were talking to those guys. They were coming like on Monday. They were coming in good faith. You assassinated them. We're done. Instead, Trump's bragging our partnership with Israel. This is very demonic.
But last thing, I'm reading Mike Adams' post right now, what he wrote, how, this was strategic by Trump. I'm paraphrasing here, but so the events on Saturday and where we're at today, how the appearance is that everything's over, time for peace in the Middle East.
No, it's not over. And the Iranians now for sure know we have to get we have to play nice to not get, completely destroyed by USA. But if Israel keeps attacking their targets, they're going to keep attacking Israel. And Israel is Israel is 1/78th the size of Iran. It has no strategic depth. If Iran and Israel just keep exchanging, weapons, Israel loses. You have 92 million versus 10 million, and you have 1,000. You have a tiny little country and a gigantic country, more than twice as big as Texas. So, it's like Rhode Island versus Texas. Who do you think is going to win if it's a knockdown drag out? And they can't get America to come in. If this was Trump's exit, like, okay, we're done. Iran, America, even Steven, we're done. Now it's just Iran versus Israel. Then Israel loses big time. They have to get America involved. It's their only way out is to use us to make us finish the fight, like some, drunken girlfriend at the bar that picks a fight with the biggest biker gang and expects you to go and take them on. To me, that's like, you're not my girlfriend anymore. You do that, we're done. You know, that's it's very sleazy and underhanded.
Where can people find you, Matt?
I'm on my real name on X. I think it's Matt Bracken 48 or something. Also, real name on Gab and on Substack, real name. Or if you see Steel Cutter 48, also me. But yeah, I mean, look, I hope we get a long respite like after Desert Storm. I was very pessimistic about the whole Desert Storm thing, and it was like, great, we won. Saddam left. 10 years later, it's Operation Iraqi Freedom, total cluster foxtrot. But this time I think Iran's going to secretly build the bomb, and Russia needs to bring in new air defenses to test them for their own purposes. I think that Israel, Witkoff will be saying, do the same thing we did with Qatar. Start winding it down, fire a few less every day, and let it go back into a calmer period. Like today, we do 5 bombing raids. Tomorrow, you do 4 bombing raids, then 3, then 2, then 1, like sharpening a knife, and then we'll just let it go back into a calm period. But that doesn't mean it's over. That just means that the Desert Storm, 1992 phase is over. You're still going to be winding up for the same thing, but the next time Iranians will have a nuke because they've learned, like North Korea, if you go the Gaddafi route, you wind up dead, or the Assad route, you wind up dead. The only way you survive is if you have a nuke, and not a nuke that you need a ship to move. You need a nuke that you can put on a missile. So they're going to go up very deep underground, clandestine, with their enriched material. And they may even be given a nuke. We don't know. Pakistan, North Korea may slip something to them. Very possible.
Matt, as always, I enjoy our conversations. I know it won't be that long before we talk again, and we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Oh yeah, I also have books. So.
Okay, do you want
to? Yeah, I was talking about this on Alex Jones last week, so I got a huge order this week, which is great. It's like, that could never happen. Well, it's happening. Our ICE agents are getting beaten up in the streets, and their prisoners are released.
That's what that I find that very peculiar how they send in ICE agents. A small number of people into these areas with no backup, no very minimal. Like they send them in L.A. in the garment district, and they have no protection.
Yeah, and the local police won't do anything for them. So we are in our own low-level insurgency in this country. It's the last time in the world we need to get on an escalation ladder that could lead us into a ground war against a country, to repeat myself, 5 times bigger than Vietnam or Germany. 5 times bigger. So Americans, if you ask somebody in Kurdistan what's bigger, Rhode Island or Texas, they'd have no idea. They never heard of either one, right? We would know it's ridiculous for Rhode Island to attack, to get in a missile war with Texas. We'd say that's insanity.
Well, but that's
what we're doing.
But it's also is like the fact that these supervisors of ICE are putting their officers in these positions. And I'm looking. Another thing I'm looking at right now is Katie Daviscourt. If you don't follow her, one of the best journalists up in the Northwest.
Katie who?
Daviscourt. She's in Seattle. So she's at a lot of. She's like the number. It's
like
Andy
Davis Court.
Daviscourt, yeah, Davis, yeah. She's like the number 1 target up there of Antifa, or one of the top targets. Jonathan Cho, Andy No, and Katie Daviscourt. Like anytime Katie shows up, Antifa's all over her.
Yeah, one of the ways this low-level insurgency war in the USA is manifesting is doxing versus arresting doxers. So there's a war at the internet level going on right now between doxing ICE agents, which means you could get a Molotov cocktail thrown into your child's bedroom tonight. That's doxing an ICE agent because they see them as like Gestapo, right? So if the Justice Department is winning this war, then doxers are being arrested and charged with federal crimes. And like it's so scary for them that they won't do it anymore. If the Antifa side is winning, then ICE agents are being doxxed at a rate that the Justice Department can't even keep up with. So right now it looks like the insurgents, the Antifa, BLM, Mecha, that side is winning because they're not afraid of the Justice Department. They're doxing these guys, and when you dox them, you're putting them in such a threat that they've got to like leave the state. That means I've got a house or I've got an apartment or a mortgage, and I'm more afraid of getting a Molotov cocktail thrown into my kid's bedroom tonight than I am of, going out to do an arrest tomorrow. So this is a manifestation of this low-level guerrilla warfare we're going into. So this is the last time that we need to get into a war with Iran. We got enough problems here.
Matt, as always, until next time.
Yeah, peace.
Mic drop.